Your job is just a hobby, isn't it? Just quit already. There was a sound as if something snapped. I didn't respond, and my husband smiled with satisfaction. Seeing his triumphant look, I realized the husband I once loved was no longer there. Expressionless, I faced my husband and extended something towards him. My name is Sophia, a 35-year-old housewife. I have a 15-year-old daughter, Olivia, and my husband, Michael, making us a family of 3. Michael and I were childhood friends. Our families lived next door to each other. We started dating in college. Back then, when I was crying over being cheated on by a then-boyfriend, Michael was the one who stayed by my side. Our parents had always hoped we would marry, and were thrilled when we did. So much so, that when we announced our relationship, both families threw a celebration party. As working adults, we started living together, near our respective workplaces. I worked at a small design company, a budding illustrator with demanding days. As for Michael, he worked at a renowned local corporation. The company was known for its clean management practices, and even those in sales positions typically got to return home at regular hours. Before marriage, there was a discussion involving our parents. They suggested I change jobs, but Michael and his parents supported my career, and I continued until I became pregnant. Michael shared household chores with me. He'd take over when I was busy, never complaining. He'd leave notes when he went to bed first, and plan surprises for anniversaries and birthdays. Of course, I took over the chores during his busy periods. In this way, we supported each other. Our relationship smoothly continued, and we married in our 3rd year as working professionals. I got pregnant soon after marriage. It was around this time that Michael changed. Suffering from severe morning sickness, I retired early. I started spending more time at home. But being at home didn't mean I could move around much. From morning until bedtime, the nausea was relentless, and I often spent the whole day confined to the bathroom. I thought Michael would understand. But one day, as soon as he came home, he looked around the living room and said, "Wow, what's this mess? Hey, Sophia, what have you been doing all day?" Today, I felt too sick to move from the bed. Maria managed to keep the house clean even during her pregnancy, and she worked and cooked meals too. I wonder why you can't do the same, Sophia. I was speechless. Maria is the wife of his close friend. Her husband, William, is 3 years older than us and is also Michael's boss. Since the beginning of our marriage, we have been close as a couple. Of course, this includes Maria, his wife, as well. Maria, the same age as William, had no friends nearby as her family lived far away. Every time we met, she expressed her joy at being friends with me. William and Maria have a 10-year-old daughter. They were childhood friends too and incredibly got married as students at 18. They had a child while still in college. Both Maria and William attended a correspondence university, balancing childcare, studies, and part-time jobs with support from their families. Michael and I respected them for that. But I hated being compared to Maria. Why suddenly compare me to her? If I were well, I would have done it too. It's not about that. If you really wanted to, you could have done it. You're not sick all day, are you? Think about how I feel coming home to no dinner. With that, he went into the bedroom. Since then, he stopped doing any household chores. But only when we were alone. When guests came, he suddenly became cooperative. For instance, when my mother-in-law comes to help, he returns to doing chores as usual, just for that time. He actively cooks and starts hanging laundry. Then he says, "Sophia is pregnant, so we shouldn't push her too hard. It would be terrible if something happened. Besides, men should do their share of the household chores too." I thought, how can you say that? But I couldn't speak up, seeing how happy his mother was. However, as soon as she left, he abandoned everything he was doing. I helped today, so you can handle the rest, right? You've slacked off enough. I wasn't slacking off. Can't you at least finish what you started? Sophia, you should do it. You need to break the habit of taking it easy. Maria managed on her own, right? And since Mom is here to help, don't be too demanding. Every time I tried to argue, he would bring up Maria. No matter how many times I asked him to stop, it never changed. After our daughter Olivia was born, he started treating me like a housekeeper. He criticized everything, from the way I folded laundry, to the menu I cooked, even how I cleaned. He also began to meddle in our finances, reducing the budget for my cosmetics and clothes. I lost all freedom because of that. But when guests visited, he put on a show. Especially the day before we had commitments with his or my parents, or William and Maria, he would send me to the beauty salon. Then he would belittle the beautified me. He would tell everyone, I always tell Sophia she needs to stay beautiful. But she's always so modest. Everyone believed his charming words, so I couldn't tell the truth to anyone. I was afraid of ruining the relationship with my kind-in-laws. We lived like this for 10 years. After a decade, I got used to it. I learned to ignore his words and to think of him as just an ATM. We remained close with William and Maria, even after 10 years. However, Olivia started feeling uneasy about her father's behavior and finally confronted him. Dad, why do you always hide your bossy attitude when guests are around? What? That's not true. And that's just keeping up appearances. Surely you don't expect me to tell everyone that Mom can't handle the housework, right? I'm just covering for her so she doesn't get embarrassed. She looked unconvinced by his explanation. Seeing that, I started thinking about divorce. But having not worked for 10 years, I was worried about supporting myself and Olivia. Just when I was troubled, an unexpected contact came. It was from the design company I had left 10 years ago. The president told me that they had expanded the business and were looking for freelance illustrators. They thought of me, having worked there before. When I left, everyone had tried to persuade me to stay, saying they hoped I would return one day. I gratefully accepted the offer. However, I couldn't neglect the household chores. So, I initially took on a remote part-time position during a trial period. For half a year, I managed to balance work and household duties successfully. But Michael seemed unhappy with my remote work, increasing his snide remarks. Don't neglect the household chores for a low-paying part-time job. If you can't handle housework or support the finances, you're just a burden. That was his constant refrain. Olivia supported my work and helped with the chores when she got home. Michael would praise her for helping, but after she went to bed, he would make sarcastic comments to me. Still, I didn't let it bother me. The reason was that my savings were steadily growing. However, the problem was the reason for divorce. I wondered how to tell my kind-in-laws about the psychological abuse without shocking them too much. Since our homes were next to each other, I wanted to keep seeing them even after the divorce. While I was thinking about this, I received a call from someone. I have something I want to discuss. Can I come over to your house tomorrow? It was Rachel, the daughter of William and Maria. Rachel, now a college student, resembles Maria and is very beautiful. Moreover, she has a good personality and often plays a lot with Olivia. She wanting to talk? To me? I had a bad feeling about this, so I set a time when Olivia would be out for her lessons and prepared some snacks for the day. Sophia, long time no see. Rachel, it's been a while. What's this sudden talk about a consultation? I had her a seat and served her tea. Then she started talking, revealing shocking facts. Sophia, I'm really sorry. I'm in a relationship with Michael. Her words were completely unexpected. I thought it was a joke, but seeing her tearful eyes, I realized it was true. I'm a bit confused. Can you start from the beginning? Is it okay if I record this? Yes. At first, I didn't know it was Michael. We met on a dating site, and the photos were different. After about a month of messaging, he suggested we meet. I thought he was a college student like me, so I wanted to meet him. But when I got to the place, it was Michael. She started crying at that point. She must have been very shocked. I sat next to her, rubbing her back, and encouraged her to continue. I'm sorry, the hardest part must be for you. That's okay. Keep going. I want to know everything. Okay. At first, I thought Michael was there by coincidence, so I sent a message to change the meeting place. Then he approached me, recognizing me. He said, "Let's talk for a bit, as long as you don't tell Dad and Mom." He suggested going somewhere private and led me by the hand. She hesitated, clearly finding it difficult to continue. From her reaction, I understood where it was. It was a hotel. What happened then? I told him I wouldn't enter, but he threatened to expose everything if I didn't. I didn't want Dad and Mom to find out, so I agreed to just talk and went in. I could guess what came next. Her hands were trembling. I covered her hand with mine. She gathered her courage and told me everything. As soon as we entered the hotel room, he pushed me down and, after it was over, he took pictures of me, stunned, and said, "You know what will happen if you don't want to be exposed," and gave me money. It was the same thing from then on. I was so scared. She then broke down in tears. I stroked her while biting my lip. I couldn't believe Michael could do such a despicable thing. After crying, Rachel took an envelope from her bag. This is the money he gave me. It's $50,000 in total. He never spent money on you, but gave me this much, which is unacceptable. I don't have much savings, but I'll pay for the divorce trial deposit. I plan to talk to my parents after this. I don't expect them to forgive me. Just wait a moment. Let's go talk to your parents together. I'll keep this money for now. I wouldn't dream of asking you for a deposit for a divorce trial. In fact, Rachel, you're the victim here. You could even file a police report if you wanted. She started crying again at my words. I contacted William and Maria, and without telling Michael, arranged for them to meet at our house. Since I couldn't let Olivia hear this, I arranged for her to stay overnight at her grandparents' house. She was delighted to go. When I told Michael, he said he'd also stay at his parents' house, so we decided to meet at our house. Then Rachel's parents, William and Maria, arrived. Rachel didn't seem able to talk, so I decided to tell them everything. After hearing it all, William and Maria were furious with Michael and then apologized to me. Sophia, I am so sorry we've caused you pain. No, it's not like that. Rachel is a victim. You don't need to apologize. I just need your cooperation. It's a relief you say so. We both are grateful. I'd punch him right now if I could. Tell us anything, we're here to help. Maria had been silent, but then she looked up at me. Sophia, Rachel is still an affair partner, no matter what. She should have spoken up honestly instead of complying because she was afraid of us finding out. But it's our fault too. We didn't have that kind of open relationship with her. I'm sorry for causing you trouble. Maria, with tears in her eyes, expressed her apology. I felt tears welling up too. After she looked up, I started discussing our plan. Actually, the $50,000 Michael gave Rachel, I don't think it's from our household money. I didn't receive any living expenses, but I did open his salary statements every month. Sure, his allowance was generous, but $50,000 in half a year? It's not possible. I haven't seen any debt collection letters, and his parents don't lend or borrow money. Yet, he actually handed over $50,000. Doesn't it sound suspicious? Hearing this, William seemed to have an idea and agreed to investigate. I got the dating site account details from Rachel and started monitoring it. We decided to have Maria act as an undercover agent to meet the account holder. About a week later, they contacted me, saying, "We've gathered all the evidence." We then devised a plan. The execution place was my in-laws' house. Sorry for the sudden call, Abigail. Can we all talk next weekend? My parents and William's family will join too. From my call, my mother-in-law, Abigail, sensed something and agreed, asking to keep it a secret from Michael. I then got permission from Rachel and vaguely explained the situation to Olivia. She was shocked to learn about her father, but more upset about Rachel being hurt. She had been dissatisfied with his attitude and promised to stay with me after the divorce. She also wanted to be present at the meeting. I hesitated, but respecting her determination, I agreed. On the day of execution, we headed to my in-laws' house. It's rare for William's family to join us. I wonder what it is, Michael said cheerfully. Apparently, Abigail told him she had something to discuss. When we arrived, William's family was also just getting there. Sorry for the sudden visit to your parents' house. Mom was sudden too. Hey Maria, you're as beautiful as ever. Love your outfit today. Unaware of the tension, Michael cheerfully chatted. Then he turned to Rachel. Rachel, long time no see. You've grown a bit, haven't you? More and more like Maria. Got a boyfriend yet? The atmosphere was tense at his words. She forced a smile and said, Come on, Michael. We just saw each other last week. Did we? Maybe we passed each other at the station. Caught off guard, he hastily changed the subject. We then all entered the house. Everyone sat down, and there was a moment of silence. It was broken by Abigail. So, Sophia, what's this talk you mentioned on the phone? You have something to talk about, Mom? Sophia? What's going on? I produced the salary statements and a divorce application. His parents looked at me in surprise. Michael, without even looking at the salary details, tore up the divorce application. Gathering everyone for some joke? Is it because you can't do housework lately? That's because you're scribbling pictures for a tiny allowance. Your job is just a hobby, right? Just quit it already. There was a sound as if something snapped. I didn't respond, and Michael smiled with satisfaction. Seeing his triumphant look, I realized the husband I once loved was no longer there. Expressionless, I faced and extended something towards him. You should recognize what this is immediately. What? How did you get this? No, it's not what it seems. What's different, I'd like to know. How will you explain being a comforter to your best friend's daughter? William's words left Michael speechless. The in-laws read the documents, looking pale. My father-in-law, Alexander, said, Michael, not only did you betray Sophia, but you betrayed your best friend and damaged his daughter. Michael, not only did you betray Sophia, but you betrayed your best friend and damaged his daughter. Explain yourself. Sophia, I'm sorry. I thought our foolish son was making you and Olivia happy. Alexander glared at Michael, his face red with anger, while Abigail wept. Michael, seemingly resigned, answered seriously. Since marrying Sophia, I fell for Maria at first sight. But she was married to William and even had a child. I couldn't ruin their happiness. And I cared for Sophia too, so I decided to marry her. But when she got pregnant, she barely moved. It annoyed me how she used her illness as an excuse. Maria was beautiful, perfect at housework and childcare, so I always wondered why Sophia couldn't do the same. And she couldn't do housework properly but started remote work. I couldn't stand it. She even made Olivia help with chores. What a terrible mother. But I didn't divorce her because Olivia was cute. I'm kind like that. Recently, I've been meeting women who resemble Maria through online dating. One of them was Rachel. I was thrilled when I found her. I lured her out using a different photo and manipulated her by mentioning William and his family. Being with Rachel, who looked just like Maria, made me happy. You're the worst. Maria and Rachel are different people. And threatening with photos? And that money you gave Rachel, it was the company's expenses, wasn't it? William's words made Michael snort. The in-laws were stunned. It was a shock to learn that their son, whom they had thought was kind, was the complete opposite. I'll just pay back the expenses with the divorce settlement money from Sophia. Sophia, you didn't do housework, so you should pay the divorce settlement. And child support too. Don't rely on me because you have no money. And I'll remarry Rachel. I get a wife who looks like Maria, and Olivia will be happy with a young mom. Plus, our kids will be cute. At Michael's words, Rachel gasped. He looked satisfied, seeing her scared. Dad, what are you saying? If there's a divorce, I'll go with Mom, and Rachel won't marry you. Besides, you're creepy. I hate you. Hey, did Mom tell you to say that? She has no income or house. Let's be a family with Rachel and me. Olivia, unsurprisingly, rejected Michael's pleas. She brushed off his hand and glared at him tearfully. Those are my feelings. You made Mom and Rachel cry. How could I like someone like you? You're gross, stay away. Hey, Sophia. What have you been telling her? Michael's anger was directed at me, not Olivia. I sighed and showed him the salary statements. I told her the truth. That you're a lowlife who preyed on your best friend's daughter. And look at the payment section. I earn more than you. I'm becoming a full-time employee next month. Even as a part-timer, I'm a freelancer. I've been earning with the drawings you mocked. So there's no problem after the divorce. Michael, I'd love to hand you over to the police right now, but Rachel said she'll endure it for Olivia's sake. So I'll hold off. But the embezzlement is a different story. The boss already knows. Be prepared. Michael finally understood the gravity of the situation. He turned pale and sought help from his parents. But their response was the opposite of what he expected. We're cutting ties with you. You'll pay the embezzlement and divorce settlement money yourself, and you're not welcome here anymore. With a scumbag like you in the house, Sophia and Olivia won't be able to return. My in-laws rejected him. Then my father, Louis, who had been silent, spoke. Michael, I've known you since you were born, even when you were in your mother's womb. That's why I entrusted Sophia to you. But this outcome is disappointing. I never want to see you again. No, wait. Sophia, you won't divorce me, right? You love me, don't you? Michael, respecting my father, turned pale and looked at me. Then, unbelievably, he suggested reconciliation. He desperately clung to me, thinking I still loved him. I presented another divorce application. I want a divorce now. I don't love you anymore. I'll take all the savings as child support, so there's no need for property division. I won't take a divorce settlement from you, so pay Rachel. Oh, and what was that phrase? If you can't do housework or support the family, you're a burden. I'm returning those words to you. We don't need a burden in our future. Michael tried to retort, but no words came out. Glared at by everyone there, he reluctantly signed the divorce papers. Alexander, Abigail, even though I'm divorcing Michael, Olivia is still you two's granddaughter. Can we visit sometimes? Of course. We'd be honored if you two visit. Abigail, happy to see her granddaughter again, agreed. Then, they had Michael write a disinheritance document and kicked him out. He was fired from his job without making the embezzlement public. After handing over his savings to us, he was left penniless and now works day and night, living in a shabby house. The local rumors spread, leaving him friendless and without help. William's family moved. It seems they considered the possibility of Michael making a sudden appearance. We still keep in touch and occasionally go on trips together. We hesitated at first, but it was Rachel's wish. My career is going well, earning enough for Olivia and me. We even bought a newly built condominium and plan to move in next year. We look forward to living happily, doing what we love. How could I possibly receive a letter from Diana who has passed away? I was staring in shock at an envelope in my mailbox at home. The letter was from my mother-in-law Diana, whose funeral we had just finished yesterday. Diana had always been so kind to me since the beginning of my marriage, and I adored her. We often dined out together and enjoyed shopping, becoming close friends despite the age difference. I was heartbroken when Diana passed away suddenly. Even after the funeral, I couldn't fully accept the reality of her death. So, when a letter from Diana arrived, I was incredibly surprised. Rushing to read it, I found something totally unexpected. Firstly, the reason this letter came to me seems to be that Diana had asked the church's pastor to deliver this letter to me after her passing. It instructed me to open the closet in Diana's room at my in-laws' house, revealing a secret door. The letter detailed how to open this secret door. And at the end, it instructed me to open it alone. Checking the time, I knew that Jimmy, Diana's brother-in-law who lived with her, his wife, and their kids would all be out at school or work. I headed straight to my in-laws' house, used my key to get inside, and followed Diana's instructions to open the secret door in her closet by myself. Thank goodness, it opened. Relieved that it opened successfully, I checked what was inside. What is this? My name is Olivia. I'm a 35-year-old web designer working remotely. 5 years ago, I married Fred, who is 4 years older than me, introduced by a friend, and we still have a great relationship. However, we don't have any children yet. Both of us love kids and wanted to have them as soon as we got married, but unfortunately, we haven't been able to conceive. There was a time when I was deeply troubled and depressed about not being able to have children, but there was someone who always treated me kindly. That was my mother-in-law, Diana. Olivia, don't overthink it. There's no need to rush. How about we go to the new waffle shop by the station to change your mood? Diana always encouraged me and spoke kindly to me. She was bright, kind, and empathetic. I loved her for that. Diana saved me many times, and gradually, I worried less about not having children. My desire for children hasn't changed, but we've decided not to undergo serious fertility treatments and let nature take its course. My husband, Fred, often travels for work, so when Fred is away, Diana and I would go out for meals or shopping, just like friends despite our age difference. Diana lived close to where Fred and I lived, in the same house as my brother-in-law, Jimmy, and his family, who have 3 children. Though Diana seemed to get along well with Jimmy's family, Jimmy and his wife often hurled insults at us for not having children. Olivia, still no kids? We have 3 adorable ones, you know. It's like you're dishonoring your parents by not having any. Just cut ties with Diana already. Brittany, Jimmy's wife, would say such things with a triumphant look, and Jimmy would join in, mocking us. Brittany's right. Well, Fred has always been a bit of a loser, and even if you had kids, they'd probably be losers too. In the beginning, Fred and I would fight back against their cruel words. But as they never seemed to listen, we gradually stopped responding. We started to avoid Jimmy and his wife as much as possible. They were awful to us, but in front of Diana, they pretended to be nice. So Diana never knew their true nature. We didn't want to worry Diana unnecessarily, so we never told her about Jimmy and his wife's behavior. One holiday, Fred, Diana, and I planned to go out to eat. We headed to the in-laws' house at the agreed time. Usually, Diana would be waiting outside the front door, ready to go, but not this time. Huh? Is Diana not yet ready to go out today? That's unusual. She'll probably come out soon. Fred and I didn't think much of it and waited for Diana to come out. But even after 5 and then 10 minutes, she didn't appear, and she didn't answer her phone either. What's going on with Diana? Getting worried, we decided to ring the in-laws' house doorbell. When there was no response, we used our spare key to enter. Hey, Mom! Fred called out as we entered, but there was no answer. Feeling uneasy, we hurried to find Diana and discovered her collapsed in a room. Diana! I screamed as I ran to her, and Fred immediately called an ambulance. The in-laws' house was empty, as Jimmy and his family must have been out, leaving no one there but Diana. The ambulance arrived in about 8 minutes, and Diana was immediately taken to the hospital, but unfortunately, she passed away. It was a stroke. Fred and I couldn't accept the sudden departure of Diana from our lives. We both cried so much we thought we might run out of tears. However, there was much to be done, such as preparing for the funeral. We couldn't remain saddened and withdrawn forever. The funeral was to be a small affair with just close relatives and family, with Diana's eldest son, Jimmy, serving as the family representative. For Diana's sake, Fred and I began preparations in coordination with Jimmy. Yet, even as we contacted relatives and met with the church, I sensed an air of reluctance from Jimmy. He didn't seem to mourn Diana's death, but at the funeral, he fulfilled his duties as a family representative, at least minimally. However, after a brief chat with the relatives, I immediately called for Fred. Since I left the gathering so abruptly, the relatives looked at Jimmy with displeasure. Furthermore, at the meal with relatives after the funeral, Jimmy was the first to take his seat and showed no intention of standing up again. Even if Fred made greetings, he just drank beer. Brittany, too, was just drinking beer beside him. So Fred and I hurriedly went around to the relatives, thanking them for coming and sharing memories of Diana. Perhaps influenced by their parents' behavior, Jimmy and Brittany's 3 children were engrossed in their handheld gaming devices. Laughing loudly and playing with each other, an inappropriate behavior for a post-funeral gathering. None of Jimmy's family seemed to mourn Diana's death. The relatives must have sensed their attitude as they avoided speaking with Jimmy and his wife, choosing instead to share their farewells and memories with Fred and me. Even as the relatives' attitudes changed overtly, there was no change in Jimmy's family's behavior. They kept ordering beer after beer, talking about the inheritance and plans for vacationing during their break. It was disrespectful, considering how much Diana had done for them during her life. I couldn't help but look at Jimmy's family with disdain. The next day, Fred left early to take care of various formalities. Alone at home, I went to check the mailbox for the newspaper and noticed an envelope inside. Who could it be from? I picked up the letter to check, and to my surprise, it was addressed to me and the sender was none other than Diana. How could there be a letter from Diana? Surprised, I went back into the living room to open the letter. The letter contained something entirely unexpected. It appeared that Diana had arranged with the church's pastor to send this letter to me after her passing. The letter included instructions to open the closet in Diana's room at the in-laws' house, how to find and open a hidden door within the closet, and the contact information of a lawyer Diana had dealings with. The final instruction was to ensure I opened the closet alone. I read Diana's letter over and over. Though Diana was slender, her handwriting was large and forceful. Indeed, the powerful signature that seemed to embody Diana's very essence made me take a deep, refreshing breath. Deeply moved, I looked at the clock. 9 a.m. The in-laws' house should be empty now. I murmured to myself, quickly got ready, and headed to the in-laws' house. The children should be at school by now, and Jimmy and his spouse likely left early this morning. I saw on Brittany's social media this morning that she and Jimmy were going out together. Despite it being the day after Diana's funeral, they seemed to be sending the kids to school and boasting about enjoying their day off using vacation time. If that post was accurate, no one would be at the in-laws' house. I had to go now. I couldn't be sure when another chance would come. Using my key, I opened the door to the in-laws' house and entered slowly. The absence of Diana's welcoming smile made my heart ache. Holding back the pain in my chest, I went into Diana's room. Opened the closet, and then reached for the hidden door inside, just as the letter had instructed. Thank goodness, it opened! I sighed in relief upon opening it successfully, and checked what was inside. There, I found the items mentioned in the letter and an additional document. What is this? Looking at the documents, I felt Diana's love and was on the verge of tears. I wanted to stay and cry, but I knew I had to leave the in-laws' house quickly. It would be disastrous if someone were to come back and see me here. That is because Diana's letter had instructed to do this alone. With the documents in hand, I returned home and contacted the lawyer mentioned in Diana's letter to inform them of her passing. Just as I was about to contact Fred and Jimmy's family to see if we could all get together this weekend, I received a message. It was from Brittany. The message said they had important news and wanted everyone to gather at the in-laws' house this weekend. What could Brittany possibly want to discuss? I have nothing but a bad feeling about this. I was skeptical, but it seemed odd to refuse, so I decided to accept Brittany's suggestion. When Fred and I arrived at the in-laws' house over the weekend, I joined the meeting feeling tense. Jimmy and Brittany were smirking unpleasantly, and their 3 children were not present. Likely left with someone else. As soon as Fred and I sat down, they presented us with a document. This is Diana's will, Brittany declared confidently. The signature on the will was indeed Diana's, and it stated that all her assets were to be inherited by Jimmy and his wife. It says here that we, the couple, are to inherit the entire estate, doesn't it? So, you guys won't get a single cent from the inheritance. Too bad. Jimmy laughed vulgarly, his face twisted in an ugly grin. Fred was perplexed, but I silently stood up and returned with Mr. Smith, the lawyer who had been waiting outside. Who is this? Jimmy and Brittany were confused by the sudden appearance of the lawyer. Fred was also surprised, not knowing the lawyer had been waiting outside. This is Mr. Smith, a lawyer who Diana had been close with for many years. I introduced him briefly, and Jimmy and Brittany's expressions turned to anger. A lawyer? Why did you bring someone like that here? It was Diana's instruction. She wanted Mr. Smith to help with the property settlement agreement to make things smoother. Jimmy shouted. We don't need a lawyer. He slammed his hand on the table and gestured to Diana's will with his chin. Mom left a will. We don't need a lawyer with this. At that, Mr. Smith calmly raised his hand. Are you certain this document was entirely written by Diana herself? In response to that question, Jimmy raised his voice. Of course it is. Mr. Smith shook his head sadly at the scene. This cannot be recognized as a valid will. A holographic will must be entirely handwritten by the person themselves. Mr. Smith pointed out that the word will at the beginning and Diana's signature at the end were indeed handwritten. However, the rest of the document looked like it had been printed from a computer. The once noisy living room fell silent. In a panic, Jimmy reached for the will and brought it closer to himself. But that changed nothing. The printed, neat text remained unchanged. The handwriting of the signature and the rest of the document differs. Could this will have been forged? At Mr. Smith's suggestion, Jimmy and Brittany visibly trembled. What are you talking about? We would never do such a thing. Why are you being so paranoid? And even if it was forged, what then? Mr. Smith responded to Brittany's words. Forging a will is a serious crime. Jimmy and Brittany's faces turned pale. They were flustered, shouting incoherences and making excuses. At this moment, Mr. Smith delivered the crucial information. Olivia has a notarial will, so this will is invalid. What? Jimmy and Brittany were astonished, their eyes wide open. What's that? We weren't informed. The letter from Diana that I had received mentioned that a notarial will was hidden behind the secret door in the closet. We didn't know either until we received a letter recently. Diana revealed the location of this will in it. The letter contained not only practical matters but also explanations about why the notarial will was made and why it was disclosed to me. Diana had been feeling her health decline recently and prepared a will, but it seems she suspected that Jimmy and his spouse might tamper with it. I had assumed Diana was completely unaware of Jimmy and his spouse's true nature, but it appears Diana had some inkling of their greed for money. The notarial will stated that the estate was to be equally divided between Jimmy and Fred. What? How could she have prepared something like this? Jimmy and Brittany were in shock, their eyes wide with astonishment. At that moment, Jimmy seemed to have an epiphany and exclaimed loudly, That's right! But the beneficiary of Mom's life insurance is me, isn't it? It must be set to me, the eldest son. To Jimmy, who was shouting with his eyes blazing, I announced in a cold voice. In addition to the notarial will, Diana also entrusted me with a life insurance policy. I am named as the beneficiary. Inside the hidden door of the closet, there was not only the notarial will but also the life insurance policy. Jimmy and his wife stared at the notarial will and the life insurance policy in disbelief. I didn't hear about this. I don't know anything about this. It's normal not to be notified when the beneficiary of a life insurance policy is changed. Jimmy protested, banging on the table, but Mr. Smith was firm. Fred, looking puzzled, asked me, When did Mom entrust Olivia with these? I had no idea. Did she not want to tell me? I smiled at Fred and explained. It was written in the letter from Diana. She wanted to tell you as well, but it was safer to entrust it to just me to avoid Jimmy and his wife catching on. I see. You and Mom were really close, after all. While Fred and I were talking, Brittany interrupted us hysterically. I won't accept this. Why should you, who never even showed Diana your children, inherit her estate? This is ridiculous. I can't accept this at all. That's right. You childless ingrates don't deserve Mom's estate. We lived with her just for the inheritance. It's outrageous to split it. The entire estate should be ours. Jimmy, too, was red-faced and yelling. Brittany continued with her selfish claims. We have 3 children, you know? As compensation for not giving Diana grandchildren, you should relinquish the entire estate to us for our children's future. We, who gave her 3 grandchildren, are far more worthy than you. So, the estate should all be ours. Unfazed by Brittany's fervor, I calmly stated, What you're saying is nonsensical. Please calm down. Brittany, infuriated by my composed demeanor, yelled, Your smug attitude is infuriating. Just give us the money. Useless woman. As she screamed, Brittany lunged at me. Fred and Mr. Smith quickly intervened, but Brittany managed to punch me in the head before they could stop her. Ouch! Brittany's hands, adorned with several large rings, felt like brass knuckles, causing a dull pain that made me cry out. Stop it! Fred and Mr. Smith pulled Brittany away, but she, still unrestrained, reached out to me again in her frenzy. Give me the inheritance. I deserve it all more than you do. I have 3 children, after all. Brittany's eyes were bloodshot, her face demonic. Jimmy, encouraging Brittany in such a manner, an enraged Fred called the police. Go on, do it more. Soon after their arrival, Fred and Mr. Smith explained the situation to the police. Jimmy and his spouse were then taken away by the police. Left behind, Fred and I thanked Mr. Smith and decided it was best for him to go home for the day. What was supposed to be just a discussion about creating a property settlement ended up being a terrible ordeal. Fred and I solemnly agreed to visit later with some sweets as an apology. Fred was very concerned about me being hit by Brittany, but when I told him that the headache had completely subsided, he seemed relieved. Amidst the tumultuous developments, I muttered to myself, That was quite an intense experience. Then, Fred shared his thoughts with me. You know, Brittany always makes a big deal about her kids. She's always said how great she is for giving Mom 3 grandchildren. Don't you think she's too obsessed with money? Indeed, Brittany had always overly emphasized her children, and her greed for money earlier was intense. Well, yes. Even with the inheritance, Diana wanted to divide it equally, but Brittany wanting it all is a bit abnormal. The look on her face when she was hitting me was terrifying. Right? It's kind of abnormal. Fred fell silent, lost in thought. What's wrong? Is something bothering you? I asked, unsure of what Fred was getting at. Yeah. There's something I've been thinking about. I want to suggest to my brother that we should do DNA testing for his 3 children. I was taken aback by Fred's unexpected suggestion. DNA testing? Yes. And I'm thinking of suggesting an investigation into Brittany's background too. Something just doesn't sit right with me. It's just a hunch. Although I felt it might be unnecessary, I knew Fred's instincts had often been right in the past. All right. If you think so, let's propose it to Jimmy. When Fred brought up the matter with Jimmy, Jimmy ridiculed and yelled at him fiercely. Just because you can't have kids, don't go doubting mine. Though Jimmy shouted in protest, he snatched the DNA testing information from Fred as they parted, which might indicate some underlying concern on his part. The first results to come in were from the DNA testing of Jimmy and the children. It turned out that the two youngest were not biologically related to Jimmy. I had my suspicions about the youngest since they didn't really resemble either parent, but the middle child too. Fred was speechless. Perhaps motivated by the results, Jimmy also conducted a thorough investigation into Brittany's background. It was revealed that Brittany had relationships with multiple men even before marrying Jimmy. Moreover, she had recently been discovered by the wives of her lovers, who then demanded compensation from her. Brittany, who spent more time at home than Jimmy, had been meticulously hiding this correspondence. The total amount of compensation demanded was far beyond what could be covered by Brittany's salary or savings. As a result, Brittany was desperately trying to secure Diana's entire estate for herself. Naturally, this led to a violent confrontation between Jimmy and Brittany, throwing objects at each other and engaging in a physical fight. Their confrontation escalated to the point where blood was shed, and a neighbor, unable to tolerate the noise any longer, called the police. The arriving officers ended up taking both parties away. Already under scrutiny for forging Diana's will, now they've committed an assault as well. When the police investigated the two, it seems they uncovered numerous other offenses, including theft and harassing wealthy individuals. As a result, Jimmy and his spouse were sentenced to prison. Fred and I were deeply troubled about what to do with the 3 children left behind. With Diana gone, we were their closest relatives. We considered taking them in, but ultimately decided against it. The children had fully absorbed their parents' attitudes, openly disparaging us as incapable and childless. The eldest, Ricky, 14, was certainly old enough to understand right from wrong, and even the youngest, at 7, should have some sense of appropriate behavior. Yet, each time they saw us, all 3 sneered and hurled insults. Even with their parents' arrest and being at the heart of the turmoil, their attitudes remained unchanged. We'd be doing you childless losers a favor by letting you raise us. We never expected such words from a 14-year-old. Faced with such hostility, we felt neither love for the children nor the belief that we could raise them to be decent individuals. In the end, we contacted Brittany's parents and decided to cease all involvement with the children. It seemed the children themselves understood our firm stance, as Ricky remarked. We'd rather stay in a rundown house than staying with a useless couple without kids. We felt this was for the best, especially since they expressed such sentiments. It's worth noting that we never disclosed to the children the fact that the 2 younger ones were not biologically related to Jimmy. Whether to reveal the truth or not is something we've left to Jimmy, Brittany, and their relatives. Fred and I decided to use the estate Diana left us to make a fresh start by moving to a distant location. It was a place rich in nature with lots of greenery, and both Fred and I were able to fit in quickly. There's a charming waffle shop near our new home, and every time we pass by, I think of Diana and how I would have loved to take her there if she were still alive. Soon after we moved, I was blessed with the child I had long wished for. When I used the pregnancy test and saw the positive result appear, I couldn't help but shout in surprise and overwhelming joy. Later, when I went to the obstetrician-gynecologist and had it confirmed by the doctor, I was assured that I was indeed pregnant without a doubt. Fred and I embraced, both of us shedding tears of joy. I couldn't help but think how happy Diana would have been if she were still alive to witness this. Additionally, the business plan I had been quietly preparing is progressing well. Both Fred and I are working hard for our forthcoming child, leading fulfilling lives filled with happiness.